and we're done. That is how you make a beautiful loaf of sourdough
Hey y'all,
bread.
so that's it.
So, and we're done. Hello, welcome to Lauren Keeps. So this is the official Make My Sourdough Bread With Me video. So tonight is July 16th. It is 10:06 p.m. I am going to be making sourdough bread, and the recipe I use requires 11 to be made. Now, in the beginning of my sourdough process, I could not stand this, but as soon as I got over myself, I finally got a scale, and making 11 was not hard. So I got a digital scale here, and let's get started and make 11. So here I got some all-purpose, organic all-purpose flour, and I have my trusty dusty starter here. I just pulled it from the refrigerator. It looks kind of a little dead right now, but it still is very active. It's been in the fridge in my cup. So you see that? It's looking pretty. It's actually quite active, but it's been in the refrigerator for some days now. So I'm going to put in 30 grams of starter. Okay, we're at 22. Just a little bit more. We're at 32. I'm going to take just a little bit out. We're at 31. Boom. So now my sister is here. She wants to help me, and we're going to add in 60 grams of flour. So we're going to take this off here. We have our 30 grams of starter. Put this on. We're going to add in 60 grams of starter. Unit grams. And we're going to add 60. Cameron, you can go ahead and put in 60 grams. There you go, actually. You're just there. Okay. Put it here. And then we're going to put it in the 11.
Is this enough for 2 breads?
Now time for the water. We're going to add in 60 grams of water. Okay, pour out some of that water back into here. Just a little bit. Sometimes all of it makes a difference. Just a bit more back in. And now just a couple drops in back more. So we're going to add that into there too. 60 of flour and water, and 30 grams of starter. So now I'm just going to take this and just really incorporate it well. I'm incorporating it really, really well. And make sure to scrape down the sides. And make sure to get all that starter that I first poured in. And I like that it's actually pretty thick. It's not super duper thick, but it's thick enough. Definitely thicker than pancake batter. It's almost towards like waffle batter type texture. Scrape down those sides. And what I think I'm gonna do is, I think I'm actually going to put on top of this a paper towel, or kind of like a damp piece of paper towel, or maybe some plastic wrap, or even sometimes actual cloth towel, and put it over there and put it in a cool spot. It's summer right now, and it's really hot in our house. So what I like to do is, I don't want it to rise or get active too quickly, the 11, and so I'm gonna put it near our air conditioner to keep it cool so it doesn't rise as quickly. Even though I use cold starter, it still is gonna activate pretty quickly. I used not lukewarm water, but I used kind of cool water. Sometimes I'll use lukewarm water if I was actually doing it during the day. But since I'm doing it overnight, I'm going to use cooler water to just really help that fermentation and make the leaven bubble up and rise much slower, because I'm doing this at 10:16 p.m. I'm going to probably actually start the bread tomorrow at like 11ish. So yeah, and I'll see you guys tomorrow to continue the process. So here you go. I got the bread here. So I'm gonna scoop out my starter, which is very active from here. I'm gonna scoop it out and add it to my dough. Many people, they add in their starter with their water, they mix it together, then they add in their salt with the water, or either they add in their salt afterwards and they pinch it in with a little extra water, or they just add it in with the flour and then they mix it together. I've done all of those. I've actually been only making sourdough for maybe since the beginning of 2024. And so it's been quite a quick but very exciting thing. So I'm gonna scoop all that out. Add in the salt. So I'm going to add in the salt too. I like to sprinkle it over. Oh, there's still some more. And I'm going to take it and I'm kind of going to do like a stretch and fold type thing, where I stretch over and I fold it in. Let me wet my hands. I'm going to take a little bit of this water in here that I put in here, this lukewarm water. So my hands are pretty wet, a little wet, and I'm going to kind of stretch and fold the dough over itself to really incorporate the starter into the dough. This process at first kind of intimidated me a little bit because I wasn't sure if this would work, incorporating starter into the dough once it was done. Let me add a little more water to my hand. But I actually end up really liking it because it works really well. And I like the end result. So you see the dough is already becoming a bit smooth right there. But we still have to work it in. And at this point, once I've already done kind of like a stretch and fold type of situation, I can feel a little bit of lumps in here in the dough. So I'm going to add a little more water to my hands. I'm going to pinch it in a little bit more. And I'm going to begin to pinch in and incorporate with my hands like that. So now I'm going to grab my towel. I'm going to lay it over the bowl and let it rest for 30 minutes to really let that sourdough and the salt to incorporate in the dough. And I'm going to come back to start my first stretch and fold. So 30 minutes are up. I'm going to wash my hands, get them nice and wet. And I'm going to just begin to coax the dough off of the sides of the bowl. And I do that until I feel like I get a good release. And I love using the stretch and fold in the first step of the process by lifting it up and bring it back down to the center. I like doing this process this way because it really gets the dough nice and stretched, and it just is much easier in the first step of the dough. The dough is not as tense. The dough is not as strong. And so you can really just stretch it up and really get that good feel for the dough. So you want to do that lift up technique and pulling it back down to the center of the dough on all four sides until you get a nice square, roundish sort of look to the dough. And I'm going to transfer my dough from the bowl to a flatter dish, because from here on out, after the 30 minutes are up, I'm going to be doing coil folds. After resting again for 30 minutes, I'm ready to start my coil folds. So you can see the dough is really flat. It looks ever so slightly smoother, but not that much. And I'm going to wash and clean my hands again and then get them really nice and wet. Wet hands are perfect for handling dough because it adds hydration and it also really keeps the dough from sticking to your hands. And so, like I said, I'm coaxing the dough from the sides of the bowl, being gentle, but also not timid. And I'm lifting it up, just really making sure I'm not forcing the dough to do anything that it's not ready to do. You see that middle part was up, but the sides weren't. So I'm going to lift those sides up and let it come together. And I'm going to let the dough come against its side of itself and coil under and lay it back down. So I'm going to turn it around and do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to lift it up from the middle and just wiggle, 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 wiggle. Wiggle it up. Wiggling it up and laying it back down. And I do that all over again on the other side. You want to do this until you have a nice kind of smooth cylinder type of situation. It looks nice and tight, looks clean, and you can see now it looks like a little cylinder. And I'm going to let it rest for 30 minutes, and I'm going to come back for the third set of stretch and folds. I'm back. This time, I really wanted to give you guys a better look. So I'm back after 30 minutes, and I really, 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 really want you to get a good look. So here, I'm taking, again, wet, clean hands. Lifting up the dough and letting the dough do exactly what the method is called, coiling over and underneath itself. So I lift up the dough, and I let it come up underneath itself. And it really just goes smoothly that way. So you lift it up, gently wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. And you see the dough comes underneath itself, and I lay it on its own side, coiling underneath itself, lifting it up again and letting the other side do the same. You want to move the way you want the dough to go. And I'm going to flip it around and really make it even more smooth on the other side. And I'm going to lay it underneath itself. And then I'm going to come back again after 30 minutes and do the final stretch and fold. Or coil folds, I should say. Finally, we're on the final step. And so you can see the dough is really, really bubbly now. And I'm just doing a bit quicker this time because we've seen it before, but I'm doing the same thing as I did the first 3 times. Lifting that dough up, wiggle, 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 coaxing it from the sides. And there's not much dough sticking to the pan either. I'm going to just lift it up and really lift it up underneath itself. And you can see the coil shape that's underneath it. It's lifting up underneath itself. And if you have any bits in your dough that looks a bit dense, just pinch it out and smooth it out. And now I'm transferring it for a final bulk fermentation, where I'm going to let the dough rise for about 4 to 5, maybe 6 hours. And I have the bread resting. The dough is very bright. The bread is resting right here. And oh, these are also my blueberry surprise right there. But I have the bread resting there, and I'm gonna let it rise. This is the first rise, okay? So right now it is 3:50 p.m. and I'm gonna let it rise for about 5-6 hours. I have to see. It's gonna be kind of late when I finally do the final shape on it, the first shape on it. But yeah, so I'm gonna let it sit there for about 5 hours and then see what happens. And sometimes you just have to watch it. It's very hot, like I said, so I'm gonna just watch it and then I'm gonna come back.
Did you get full 6 peacock?
So it's nighttime and it's time to stretch the dough. I got out my banneton basket, and if you don't have one, that's perfectly fine. You can use a bowl or a sandwich loaf pan if you want to. And so I'm going to take some white rice flour because it's non-stick at all perfectly. But if you don't have white rice flour, you can use like some whole wheat flour, or you can use bread flour, or you can use all-purpose flour. Just something to really keep your dough from adhering to the cotton that you're going to be laying it on. So the dough looks really good. I loved how it turned out, and I'm just taking it out of the bowl. And I let it sit and rise for maybe about like 5 hours, maybe a little longer. Me and my family watching a TV show, so I can't really count, but I know it was more than 4 hours. And so I'm just gently letting the dough out of the bowl. And it's time for shaping. I'm going to be shaping it in a batard, but you'll see later on that it didn't quite work out that way. But I'm just going to stretch out the dough. Stretching out the dough on either side, all sides, to get it to kind of like a rectangle shape. You want to wiggle it to let it stretch out on its own. You never want to force the dough, so you just kind of let it wiggle out and do what it does. And I'm going to take the bottom half of the dough and flip it over halfway, and take the left side and flip it to the middle. And then I'm going to take the right side and flip it over the left side I just did. And so now it looks like a nice little blanket. And I'm going to take the top and wrap it down to the middle again. Meet it to the middle. You want to press it down, and your dough should be sticking good to each other. I'm taking the little ladder ends, 2 little pieces, and I'm folding them up over themselves, kind of like a button. I'm taking a shirt together and pulling it together. And so I'm just taking the sides of the dough that should be sticking well to each other and just pulling it up, and it's called stitching of the dough. And you can see those big gas bubbles that are there. That's just from the sourdough. And I'm taking the top, there should be a little flap there, and folding it over quickly. You don't want to be too quick, or else you might, break your dough a little bit like I did, but it's okay. You can see a little break there, but it's okay. And I'm going to, whether you have a knife or a bench scraper, you can pinch your dough together, and you can take those little ends and just fold them back over each other just to pinch your dough. You don't want any open pieces or any kind of little weird pieces on your dough. You just kind of want it to be smooth and cohesive and round. And as you can see, the dough is huge. Okay, the dough is huge. So I just took a bench scraper and let it rest. And so I like to let it rest for 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes on the side. After the 20 minutes are up, the dough is looking good. It's flattened out some, and I take my bench scraper, and if you don't have a bench scraper, you can easily use just a floured knife or your hands, okay? And I lay it back down, and I flip it over, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. So I'm going to take that bottom half of the dough, stretching it out a little bit, but being more gentle, and I'm going to flip the bottom half over into the center. And as you can see, the dough is a bit more gassy this time, and it's not as large. And I'm going to flip the left side over, then the right side over that left half. You can see it's a bit tighter and smoother now. Lifting that top half down and taking the top 2 little side pieces and folding them over each other, bringing them over to either side. If your dough is not cooperating with this, it's okay. You can flip your dough over and just roll it up into a ball. And now I'm just rolling either side up, and use that flour around you to help you. And now, I told you the other shaped banneton basket wasn't working, so I had to pivot and use a circular shape. because the dough was just too big. And so it wasn't fitting, and I felt like it was just going to overproof and overflow in that thing. So I had to shape it differently and just shape it into a round loaf, which was, you know, hey, it's okay. It's still going to be some good bread. So I just really turned that dough around. If your dough is sticking to the surface, add a little bit more flour. And I flipped it over and let the stitch side rest up. And I just bring it over together again to make sure that it's nice and sealed up. And I'm going to put it in the refrigerator overnight. And I'll see you in the morning. Y'all, it's the following day. And it's actually 12 p.m. Had a lot going on this morning, and you have some company over, so I had to make sure I was ready and entertained for that. So the bread ended up staying in the refrigerator much longer than anticipated. It got in the refrigerator at about like 10 p.m. last night, and then it has been in there since 12 today. So some things like that can happen with sourdough bread. That's why you put it in the refrigerator. I recommend putting it in the refrigerator for a second rise instead of leaving it out overnight to prevent any overproofing or over fermenting. So right now, I've had my oven going for about an hour now. It's been about an hour while I was finishing up doing some things. And so I had the oven preheated to 450. I also put my pot in there. Whether you use a Dutch oven or you are using just a deep lid pot, deep bottom pot. I actually use the one that my mom cooks her famous 4th of July ribs in. So I don't have a Dutch oven. I accidentally threw ours away like a year or two ago. I don't know why I did that. But I've just been using just a wide pot. It still produces a pretty good rise. So let's get started with just checking on this bread and then scoring it and then baking it. So just took it out the refrigerator. I made sure not to put it on the top shelf of the refrigerator because sometimes the light of the refrigerator can cause it to ferment quicker, even if it's in the refrigerator. So I put it kind of like on the third shelf, away from other items, and okay, it did not rise that much, but it looks quite good. It did not rise that much. It looks pretty good. It feels pretty good. It does not feel, the gas is quite firm, and it's quite wiggly. Okay, so it feels good. I have it in this round one. So I'm going to I already cut myself off a good sheet of parchment paper. This is perfect for transferring into the pot that you're going to bake it in, okay? So what I like to do is for better transference and also for easier baking, I like to crumple it up. And I'm going to lay it down. To crumple it up, and it helps. It's just different, and I feel like, I don't know, that's just a part of the process I do. So I lay it down, and right now I'm about to transfer it over. So I like to take this, lay it over, kind of get a nice little slight grip on it, kind of slide it to the edge of the table, and flip it over gently. Okay, look at that little loaf. Okay, so I'm going to dust off some of that white rice flour. It's gonna be nice and even. Okay. Beautiful. I'm so excited about this, guys. So I'm planning on kind of doing a more simpler score. I'm not gonna do an ear score, what they like to call it, but I'm gonna do kind of just like a straight down the middle, maybe a crisscross and a couple designs on the side. So for the longest time, I was using a knife. For the longest time, I was using a serrated knife to score, kind of like this. And after a while, I finally upgraded, and it still works well doing that. But to get a clean score and a really nice, open, beautiful score, the kind of ones that you see on Google, I finally invested in a blade. And so to protect myself, sometimes I even just use it like this, but I have to be very careful. So I just put it inside the little pocket thing that it came in. Press it down a little bit. Got enough there, and I hold it with a firm grip. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're not timid. You make sure you're not timid at all with the with the blade. You want to make sure that you are making quick strokes and a deep, clean stroke. So it's going to take some practice, but it's going to be okay. So how do I do this? How do I want to score this? So I think I'm going to do something. Now I'm going to make the deep score. After the deep score is made, I immediately take out my pot, super hot. Gonna open that up. Transfer it in. Then what I'm gonna do is take a spray bottle. Put that lid back on. Pop it back in there. Woo! It looks amazing. Yes. Okay, y'all. So it looks great. We're gonna cook it a little bit more for about 10-15 minutes, okay? We want it to be much more brown. It's looking good. We just need to be more brown. After about 12 minutes, the bread is done, y'all. Wonderful crust. And we're done. That is how you bake a beautiful loaf of sourdough bread. So it is about 1, and the bread turned out beautifully. I love the rise on the bread. It's very hot. I'm gonna let it cool off, and it should be done. Wow, I'm really happy with how this turned out.